First of all, that's my English name, my traditional name, Plakalan, Chuskin clan. That name got bestowed on me from serving first term on council, with my cousin said is desecration of our people of Samyama. Just going to leave you with just a little bit on why that got turned over to us. I had a co-worker, because I worked outside in the construction trade for 25 years. And they were doing a water and sewer project up there. And my fellow worker, he was what we call a swamper for heavy equipment, a track hole. And he felt so darn bad. We had a union meeting, we was in at our union hall. And he comes and sits right by me and he says, "Steve, I feel really bad what we're doing." And I says, "What's bothering you, brother?" He says, we're digging up intact graves, not just one or two. He says, "Steve, there's seven coffins deep." So next morning I call our leaders and say, "Shut that place down. Shut it down." I says, "We got trouble up there, and it's our people. They're our people that," this was the phrase that they used, "they're just a pile of bones." And that cut to my soul.
Are you speaking of Seme-Amen? Is that where you were? Oh, okay.
That's what compelled them to turn that property over to us. And when we did the testimony, our elders here were there. And the attorneys on the other side brought us into rooms, questioned us. And the attorney for the other side looked right at me and says, "We don't want him on the witness stand. We don't want him on the witness stand." So big business is everywhere. That leads into big business. You know, the Georgia Strait coal terminal, docks, expansion, whether it be gas or a dock, we're under constant surveillance of the area. Our staff at Natural Resources, we got water hydrologist, harvest manager, biologist, shellfish biologist, all real heady people, business-minded people that we rely on their technical expertise. So us as politicians could grab that technical knowledge and combat whoever it is at the political level. And that's where we laid the groundwork to protecting Cherry Point or Waukegan, one of our many homelands that all of you may just think it's a beach. But that's an old trail from here to up there along the waterway. It's our trail that led into that lake. And one thing that's never said is how impactful the railroad was as it becomes a vein to oil tanker traffic. So the big business is in working behind the scenes yet. Cherry Point is not dead. Our homeland's under attack. When I gave my affidavit for the first one, it came under the guise of Chicago Bridge and Iron. Again, I was working up there and seen them starting to pour concrete on Gulf Road. So I called up again and had that closed down. But Chicago Bridge and Iron kept their foot on the gas. And they knew that we're culturally sensitive and elder respectful. And what they did underhandedly is went behind the leadership's back and started promising things to our elders, using the elders as a tool against us, knowing deep down that we weren't going to give that property up to big business. So that battle went on, and Chicago Bridge and Iron come and gone. The next big company, SSI, comes in. Doing a study again on vessel traffic, wanting to expand. Again, I wrote out an affidavit. And again, our attorneys took my affidavit and put it out front. We want this man out front. Because he grew up on that water. He walked those beaches and he fished those shores with his grandpa. And that's one teaching that my grandpa left me. Says we walked these shores and we fished these waters for thousands of years. That's what my grandpa said to me. He would often walk when he was teaching us one-on-one on how you walk and you listen what I'm saying to you, for you're going to need it one day. And I just thought he was just talking to me. But years go by, 30 years go by, and this light bulb comes up. You may call it a tug of your heartstrings. And it's getting heavier and heavier. And I says, I got to tell this to somebody, so I tell the leaders how I feel about what's taking place. They want to increase the tanker traffic twofold. Not 438 ships now. They want upwards of 1,000 big vessels. Not just oil tankers. These are huge container ships. Huge. 5 football fields big. And within a year ago, we seen one of them capsize off the ocean. And what damaging effects is that going to be if it's an oil tanker? Gone will our resources be. Because Exxon Valdez is a good wake-up reminder of what can happen to an environment. Sure, they paid the fishermen off, but the damage still lingers. They may have paid them for a year or two, but it didn't help them out. Now, resources dying up there. Native relatives when I see them, they go and they're just like us. When the table's out, when the tide's out, table's set, and they'll go in that same place where the spill is. It's a big reef full of resource. So that oil's still there. Just to cover over it, but you get 2.5 feet down, and that sludge is still there. Nobody's paying them yet for everything they lost. That's just one tanker. Just imagine if one goes off course just a degree or two, and we've got mighty reefs out here that'll devastate our home. So that big business start looking at other reservations. Puyallup tribe. SSI is into the Puyallup tribe. And they can't talk about it because I've seen what they do there. And the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, when they went down there and did the same thing to their people as they did to ours up Samyama, and just covered it up. That's how cruel big business is. And all of you students want to know what it takes or what's entailed on an Army Corps permit or fishing regulation season. We just don't cut a regulation and go. It's many layers thick. Then it gets down to the co-manager, and the co-manager is just along for the ride, knowing good and well that we're the point of contact. We got the most at stake. And they've got a shipping terminal in Seattle, this SSI, working today, and they employ some Indians on that dock. But they're still out there. When we went to the Port of Morrow, testified down there for when they were looking at Cherry Point, just our testimony alone persuaded them to move on. Then they went down to Vancouver, Washington. We ended up there, the same ones with the same affidavits. They kept on looking at the same ones, me and a couple others. And we're watching them. So we kill that project so it moves on. Not in Vancouver, not along Columbia River Gorge anymore. So they come back to Cherry Point. So they're dusting off their business plan. Their business plan to make one more superport in the Georgia Strait. And that battle is going to take place Roberts Bank. They're proposing on putting another wing out. We all fish up there, all of us fishermen fish there. When you catch that Tawasin Ferry dock, you could see the coal dust layered on top of the water. And they're going to make it twice that size dock to the south, which all these coal is going to be exported out of there. And we've already got documentation with our fishermen and scientists by the bagfuls on what grade that coal is and the effects. The effects are far-reaching. You could start out with water. How much water is it going to take to condense it down? And the runoff, the poisons, what's in the ground. To the sea life. Then it lingers on to the out-migrating salmon. Salmon are at an all-time low return, with no end in sight. Nobody's fighting that battle but the native tribes. Our percentage return for the whole state is dwindling fast. And then with the depletion of those leads right into what are you going to do for the killer whale? Because the killer whale eats Chinook salmon, main staple diet, just like our people. So they're going to try to ride along the plans of the native tribes so that they could show that they're trying to do something, but it's not disguised right. They're only doing it for the rec group as we cut it down. That's how big business is. They go to where they make the most money. And when you've got $1 billion industry that rods and reels that are out there harassing the whales, taking what fish they think is theirs, and the effects, long-term effects of what it has on the orca population. And the sound these big ships make, can you imagine it magnifying? Water's a great magnifier. We've listened to Navy ships underwater, big ships, and how that carries and how it must. Your honing instincts, how damaging that does to our underwater relatives. So we meet with Canadian tribes. We get called upon to go testify against Roberts Bank and vessel traffic. And I went away from that meeting asking them to put a moratorium on the seaway. And we don't know the effects of what's there already. And they still won't answer us. With the traffic they got from the coal port up in Tsawwassen, on their petroleum industry and the United States petroleum industry. We got 4 petroleum docks right here. 2 of them up here and 2 down Anacortes. And they're taking more area every year from our fishermen right out here. Lots of mornings there'll be 6 tankers anchored up there and they swing around a big radius. Now fishermen can't get there because these tankers are just right up in there. And they're there for days. So our entrenched battle is going to get worse as the days go by. Because the president we got is deregulating all the federal arms there is. EPA, deregulating water. And through all of this, nobody's addressing growth management. Reason I bring growth into it is that's what big companies all about. Growing not just a little bit, growing big. I remember going island to island, sleeping on the same beach. My ancestors slept on. Same code. Showing us where to get the water. Showing us how to read the tide without even having a tide book. Showing us how to gauge just a set of sticks. Those are valuable lessons for one that just thought it was just a job. But later those jobs, I found out, my grandparents were giving me these tools, a wake-up call for when to address the needs of our people. And we need the resources from the mountaintop to the ocean floor, everything in between. That's our marching orders. From the mountaintop to the ocean floor. And the devastation that's coming. Our smart people thought when we testified just a couple weeks ago in D.C., thought there was 2 million people coming here in the next 20 years. They about fell over when the government says there's 4.9 million coming to the Pacific Northwest in the next 2 decades. And that's going to have far-reaching effects. We already got a river that's less than uncontrolled well tapping, groundwater that feeds that river, that nourishes the fish and everything in between, all for growth, housing growth, education and healthcare systems already bursting at the seam, and more coming. How are we going to be prepared if and when that oil tanker spills here? It's not if, it's when. And I, for one, I really wouldn't know what to do. Because once the damage is done, there's no getting it back. There's no getting it back. And I often tell that to other tribal leaders that see the dwindling fish and the state coming forward with, they say, surplus stuff. It wasn't in disguise to be put out there for the orca. It was for their constituents that squeaked the loudest. 250,000 rod and reelers that pay them that $1 billion annually for a privilege, that have no vested interest in raising the salmon, producing the salmon, getting them to return. Just take Seattle for instance, how big that's developed. I left this with them 6 years ago on the Columbia River. I says, we're not going to move the big cities. We're not going to move the highways. Look at what your historical fishing ground once was. Covered with cement, asphalt. You're not getting that back. Environmental damage is far greater than we could realize. And yet they struggle to get anything back in the South Puget Sound. And when I left that with them, I told them I'm not no biologist, I'm not no scientist, but if you take our fingerlings that we got in our streams and you take that runoff from these parking lots, buildings, freeway, all that asphalt, I will guarantee you they won't live. And yet they continue to pump out millions of fish and they're not getting out to the ocean. So what do? They turn around and make a commercial out of that. Just what I said, and I wonder who the elephant in the room was then. Using Billy Frank as an environmentalist to look at runoff. When I said those exact same things to them, and I went to them and says, well, who let the cat out of the bag? He says, this was only supposed to be for us in this room. You know, when you're talking leader to leader, you would think we would all come together with one game plan and combat things that way. So SSI went into the pipeline because the pipeline's part of their business too. It's just another extension of their shipping business. We got called to go to South Dakota, testify over there on a pipeline getting ramrodded through the Dakotas. And all that time they were wondering how we stopped the coal part. And I says the community, the fishermen got all together and they compiled all their information, wrote a book on it, on how we attack issues, whether it be water, natural resources, the land, our people. And it's cold hard facts that the deeper you dig, the worse off they look. Because our history goes back thousands of years. And when the fight is getting international, because we're going across that border and shouldering up with our relatives over there just on vessel traffic and expansion of that dock, expansion of their pipeline, because they both go hand in hand. Got to ramp up the oil production, more barrels, more ships, and more effects on how our lives are structured. So it's taken such a toll on our whole fishery. We no longer fish 5 to 7 days a week. Our fisheries is managed to hours now. Hours. So somebody owes us a business explanation on what their true agenda is. And we go away for whatever you're talking about, thinking, am I just in the way as a tribal nation for expanded growth? Oil money, gas money. I really think hard about that, on just how this game is played at the business end, at the government level, on how they trade our lives and the things we just take for granted, like one plays with a deck of cards. On just stringing us along until they said we had enough of you. I really think that in the back of my mind, seeing how they work and who they work for. Because a lot of those federal agents, between all of us in here, they'll trade us off in a heartbeat. Whatever we do. So we gotta really put our minds together on how vital that waterway is to us, our freeway, and how we take care of it. Call somebody when the damage is done. Well, I say that when the damage is done. I brought this key point up when they're making revetments anywhere along the shoreline. I says, did any tribe in Washington State ever initiated a take? A take means taking away your fishing resource on the state or the federal government for putting that jetty in that feeds to that port or that ferry terminal? Our answer is, haven't filed one. To this day, I don't know of any takes for building those revetments, the shoreline armoring that protects their loading dock or ferry dock. Something to really think about. And what kind of traffic are we willing to put up with? That's why I asked for a moratorium. And take a look at the effects of what's going on now. They're not even controlling what's there now compared to 500 more ships coming wanting to use our waterway. So that's what's coming. And I don't really know what's in store, but I embrace myself for the worst. For what's in store for the next decade. As the prices start to skyrocket. On this nation's economy. Again, knowing good and well that there's a master plan in the federal government to one day sever ties with Native nations. And their eyes were just an obstacle in the way. And abrogation is in their mind. And are we going to have the tools necessary to survive our people? Give them the tools so they know. And get them aware of what's going on in their surroundings. There's a lot of symptoms there. Air quality, water quality, environmental damages. Forests devastated. Another phrase I left the Dakotas with is, it's not a Native nation that cut down the last tree, that poisoned that water, or caught that last fish. When are they going to learn we can't eat money? That's what I left them. And then coming home, Nick sees that same phrase in YouTube, and I was just going what my heart felt. You know, I look at this place, and that's what I really think about. Turn of the century. This place, our home, with giant cedar trees. I mean giant. Like 12 foot across at the base of them. How this was God's country. and reading up on the history. And how the logging industry come and start taking this old growth. By 1924, grace of God, they made us all citizens. And that was the first year their logging phase was done in this park. Just hitting Linden, Sumas area. The first phase is done for growth. That's why I said growth. Nobody's addressing growth management because it happened to us. Nobody addressed it. But yet, we look around. Our names are intact. Places, if I had an Indian name, we used it. And look at the pioneers just in our community. Going to Whatcom, because that's Whatcom to me. That's what I always know it as, Whatcom. To you people, it's Bellingham. Peabody, Roder, Eldridge, a handshake deal. Now we could use that waterway, and then they put the pilings in to catch the logs to ship overseas, for that to grow. City of Bellingham grew just on a handshake deal. Those fish no longer come back to Squalish Creek. I was told it was Squalish Creek, not Squalicum. Because Squalish means home of the chum salmon. My grandfather told me a legend of that creek right there where Bellingham Cold Storage is. He had a little seine boat. He made it. And this is all a village. And he'd go there in the fall time to put fish up for the community. Go there and make one set with his little squall hull, beat seine boat. And give it to the whole people. All the people along here. Just hand them out. Now there's not even a fish in that creek. When I was 12 or 13 years old, that creek over there, I can remember the community members walking up and down with a bag of steelhead, going down the road, going home. And that creek is just elbow to elbow, people taking. But then again, our leaders at that time, that was when the bolt decision was coming out. It all started with fighting over steelhead. They wanted them as a game fish. And to us, a fish is a fish is a fish. And that's how that, so it carried out and how everything ties together. We've got to have a healthy salmon stock, to have a healthy community, to have a healthy Salish sea. Nothing's disconnected. Nothing. Our world, everything's connected. That education, Juanitum, white man world, everything's real narrow. You don't veer one way or the other. But us, we're whole. Something for your kids to really think about. How we look at things is all connected. Like I said, from the mountaintop to the ocean floor. everything in between, every nation in between, every village in between. Because we can't leave them out. That's enough for today. I've got another meeting at 2, and any questions? What eating at your heart and which direction we're moving? Because we've got a Salish Sea member going to give testimony in California tomorrow. Catching an airplane flight out, going to go meet with the California tribes just on the vessel traffic and how vessel traffic and hatcheries and fish are all tied together with the water. So that's what's in store for us. Our plate is full, and any questions or what you'd like to fire away?
Because you are a firebrand, you do speak your mind and you speak very clearly. You have your opinions and you're not afraid to share them. How do you keep recharged because you're always going out there?
Power of prayer from my grandfather. I always wake up with that prayer, and when I need to, I will. There's laws of sacredness that we take care of ourselves, that we don't divulge in those, and I take myself away and recharge that way.
So we do have our ceremonies that do carry us forward and help us to heal. And now there was this big victory that somebody's going to put on, I can't recall, it was like resources or somebody, I don't remember who, is going to have a big jump in the water because they won the court case. How do you feel about Whatcom celebrating in that fashion?
I really feel that any outside agencies, they're really afraid to come to us to really ask what's on their mind, how they're going to do business. And I really know that they're hesitant to come because I confronted this numerous times. I would like to come out and help, but I'm afraid to go to that place. They're afraid to come out here. That my thought, my sentiment exactly. You know what? And I keep this phrase I give to them. If you don't know fear, and you haven't confronted fear, what are you afraid of? I never met fear, so I'm not afraid of fear. Go ahead.
Thank you for sharing the words today. I keep that in my heart and carry it. My uncle is over there. I want to go hear him talk too. Yellow Walk. Thank you. I'm honored today. And for the song, our brother from Les Burst sang too.
Yeah, I have a question. A while back, I was talking with some fishermen out here, and the discussion came up about how our people fished from January right up into the spring months. But that has been closed down for years now. So I was wondering if they are planning or working on trying to get that back.
Well, we came up with a hatchery protection task force team, and we put out a set of plans, a 10-year plan that we brought to our council, and the council's backing us on the 10-year plan, and it's $10 million that they're going to put towards hatchery supplementation. Like right now, we are currently in ESA holdings, which means we have to follow the regulations of Endangered Species Act, and they have a special permit that lets us go and monitors the fish that are entering and going up and spawning in the North and South Fork now. How that came to be is probably 10 years ago, 6 to 10 years ago, Randy Kinley and I, God rest his soul, came up with a plan of captive brood. Captive brood is your natural origin fish. These fish that are thorn in our side, you could only harvest a certain percent of them. And of that percentage, it spits out a number. And we get to catch 39 natural origin fish from January to July. But with this captive brood project, that's with us thinking outside the box. We took these natural origin fish that were in the creeks and tributaries, put them in the hatchery, let them grow out. They're in captivity. When I came back on 10 years ago, this is a bright spot of it, there was 9 fish in that tank. They were only about that big. But they're natural origin fish. They're wild fish that came from out in the wild, and we got them in the hatchery. Now, spring forward 6 years. Last year, those 9 fish happened to have a return up our Skookum Creek hatchery of 3,500. So that we turned the corner and we're ramping up. And now I'm in the process of training fishermen to go and do the monitoring, which I'm going to have the Natural Resource Department step away and only have a biologist go and monitor the catch. So we give that fishery back to the community, and we'll have scheduled days that they could go out and get their own. They will, in essence, have their own first salmon ceremony even before we have that one. Because that's long-lived. It's going to be outlived. And we are turning the corner, because today's rate, I was just looking at the numbers, and it's of those captive brood fish that are hatchery and hatchery marked. Mind you that they're wild fish, just that they're in the hatchery. The ones with coated wire tags and marks on them, we're getting 30 of those hatchery fish to 1 natural wild fish. So those 30 fish is the ones we're going to be targeting for the fishermen. And we'll have scheduled days probably from March to July. It's a dream, and we're going to have it videoed when I'll be the happiest guy around when that day comes. That's what I have in my heart for the community, and we're not stopping there. We're looking at ramping up coho, doing chum and humpies, and because chums and humpies are the easiest to enhance, because you could just let them go, and as soon as they hatch out, you can let them go. You know, and they seem to do the best. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking